Welcome to The Debate. Our digital reality is, well, it's fracturing. The proliferation of AI-generated text, images, and video, what we now call synthetic content or deepfakes, is fundamentally eroding public trust at a scale we've really never seen.
And it's not just theoretical, is it? We saw the immediate tangible damage when that completely fake image of a Pentagon explosion went viral. It actually caused a real, if brief, dip in the stock market.
Exactly. And analysts are now bracing for a future where some estimate, and this is a staggering number, that as much as 90% of the internet could be synthetically generated by 2026. This is, it's an existential crisis for information itself. So the critical question we need to wrestle with today is this. Considering the inherent difficulty and just the breakneck speed of generative AI development, where should our primary mitigation focus lie? Should we bet on building increasingly complex technological detection systems, or should we be investing primarily in reinforcing our societal defenses, specifically, stringent regulatory frameworks and widespread public digital literacy?
A huge question.
It is. And for my part, I'll be arguing that advanced AI-based detection systems are not just helpful. They are the indispensable front line of defense against this overwhelming scale of manipulation.
And I come at it from a different angle. While technology is obviously part of the solution, I'm going to maintain that making detection the primary focus is a losing proposition. It just commits us to an endless, resource-draining technological arms race where the generative side always holds the advantage. So for me, the only truly effective, sustainable mitigation has to rely on regulatory deterrence, making it too costly to create and spread this stuff, and fundamentally on strengthening human critical thinking.
Okay, well, my position rests almost entirely on two things: scale and speed. Technological detection systems, especially those using sophisticated large language models, LLMs, and multimodal approaches are absolutely necessary as the first automatic layer of defense. The threat landscape is just so vast. A bad actor, regardless of their skill level, can synthesize hundreds of fake articles, convincing images, and realistic audio in minutes using tools that are just widely available. The cost of manufacturing disinformation has effectively dropped to zero, but the cost of the damage is massive. So we have to use AI to fight AI. And we are seeing incredible progress in detection strategies that move far beyond simple text comparison. We're developing multimodal analysis models, things like Sniffer or LVLM-4FD, which combine textual, visual, and audio evidence for far more robust detection. But perhaps most significantly, we now have these agent tech verification models like Fact Agent. These aren't just giving us a simple yes or no answer. They actually mimic human fact-checking by breaking the verification task into structured, stepwise subtasks, and then systematically checking every claim against reliable sources. And that provides the transparency and the explainability that older sort of black box detection systems were critically lacking.
I see the appeal of that, sure. I see why you think speed and explainability are the answer. But let me give you a different perspective on the real-world efficiency of those tools. Relying on technological detection is, I think, fundamentally flawed because it's an ever-shifting, technologically disadvantaged goalpost. Generative AI simply advances faster than any detection system can hope to catch up. I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the tools you mention offer any kind of long-term resilience. We know from numerous studies that existing detection tools are easily evaded, and often by the simplest means. Just resizing or cropping an image can cause a detection algorithm's efficacy to drop dramatically, sometimes rendering it completely useless. For text, simply paraphrasing the AI-generated content, just changing a few words here and there, is often enough to break a detector.
A recent University of Maryland report concluded that state-of-the-art detectors are just not reliable in practical, real-world scenarios. So if our main defense can be defeated with a right-click and a save-as function, then our focus has to immediately shift to human resilience and regulatory deterrence. We need to break the chain of creation and distribution. We need public action teaching verification skills, like reverse image searching, critically examining domain names for subtle typos, looking for unprofessional design elements, And critically, we need governments to act. This is why countries like Indonesia are urgently drafting specific deepfake regulations, because they recognize that only law enforcement and deterrence can provide the necessary structural defense.
Okay, that's a compelling argument, but let's be really precise about the nature of the failure you're citing. The challenges posed by detection evasion, where a simple resize or a paraphrase defeats a system, are severe. I'll grant you that. They do erode public faith, and we saw a real-world crisis of trust when that Texas professor threatened to fail an entire class because an AI detection chatbot incorrectly flagged their genuine work as AI-generated. That false positive caused it caused a huge amount of disruption and really demonstrated the fragility of these current non-agentic detection methods. But while evasion is a challenge, we have to consider the inescapable requirement of scalability. You cannot combat the massive petabytes-level volume of viral content with manual human checks or by waiting for regulators to act. We need systems that can triage billions of pieces of content per day. The speed and generalizability of non-agentic large language models, systems like GPT-4, leveraging what we call zero-shot capabilities, meaning they can generalize and detect patterns without being explicitly trained on that specific new type of deepfake, are absolutely essential for handling the fire hose of content flowing across social media. This introduces a difficult trade-off, which we have to manage. The choice is often fast detection, even with lower explainability and the risk of occasional false positives, like in the Texas case, or slow, reliable detection, like with FactAgent. For low-stakes content, we need the speed. For critical high-stakes domains, like complex scientific discourse, then agentic models become necessary. Because that explainability is paramount. We just can't leave it to the untrained eye. Studies have shown that when faced with sophisticated scientific misinformation, test subjects trusted fake news articles 66% of the time.
If the issue is complex, human common sense is demonstrably insufficient.
But you frame this as a trade-off between speed and reliability. But I'd argue that speed serves the engine of misinformation itself, which is emotion. If a system is fundamentally unreliable, its speed only accelerates the erosion of trust in all information, including the detection system. The fundamental challenge remains. This stuff spreads rapidly because it exploits psychological factors, fear, anger, confirmation bias. Detection systems cannot fix the root cause, which is the user's low digital literacy and their tendency to engage with content that provokes an emotional response. It's a behavioral problem, not purely a technical one. The dual problem, as we're seeing in discussions around countermeasures in developing economies like Indonesia, is not just weak regulation, but low public digital literacy. We need strategies that prioritize public education. Consumers could be taught critical evaluation, asking if a source immediately provokes an emotional spike, if it makes an extraordinary claim without sufficient evidence, or if it contains obvious clickbait language. These are human factors, cognitive defensive mechanisms that a machine learning model, however sophisticated, cannot instill or fully mitigate. If we don't fix the human vulnerability, we will forever be chasing the synthetic content itself.
I fully agree that psychological influence and literacy are vital components. Misinformation does exploit confirmation bias, and we are hardwired to share engaging, often sensationalized content. But relying solely on human verification is just too slow and, as the data shows, fundamentally susceptible to bias and exhaustion. The complexity of today's deepfakes has evolved past the point where the average citizen can reliably spot the inconsistencies. When content is multimodal, combining manipulated text, images, and now highly realistic audio, the cognitive burden is just too great for the average user. And this is precisely why we need sophisticated technological systems. Consider the complexity of those manipulated Deddy Mulyadi videos that circulated in Indonesia. The hoaxes used older, completely unrelated footage of the public figure, and then an AI-generated voice sounding precisely like him was added to create a false narrative about loan services or political giveaways. The average person simply cannot spot this cross-modal inconsistency, where a generated element, the voice, is layered onto genuine but out-of-context visual footage. This is why we need sophisticated multimodal systems like Sniffer, which can analyze text, audio, and video all at once and flag those subtle contradictions. The complexity of cross-modal analysis is a necessary technical investment.
But that takes us directly back to the need for clear legal and organizational defenses, rather than sinking all of our resources into a technological arms race where the cost of developing a system is millions and the cost of defeating it is an hour of coding. Mitigation requires clear legal accountability and organizational responsibility to stem the flow at the source. The government's role goes beyond detection. The Ministry of Communication in Indonesia, for example, is facing a difficult choice right now, whether to create specific legal frameworks for each AI threat, like deepfakes, or draft a broader, more comprehensive regulation to cover all evolving threats. This is a crucial debate. We have to understand that legal sanctions, like penalties under their IT law, are the only true mechanism for providing the deterrent effect that technology alone cannot. And organizations have to employ proactive defense measures. Instead of relying on people to find the hoax, organizations need to use search engine optimization and answer engine optimization, SEO and AEO, to ensure that valid, transparent information is displayed higher. We need organizations to flip the script, use their amplification networks, their official partners, their customers, to proactively ensure valid information overpowers false narratives. And critically, they must avoid directly engaging with these campaigns, opting instead to post factual, passive responses on official channels to starve the hoax of the attention it craves. That shifts the burden of proof away from the consumer.
I acknowledge the critical role of legal frameworks, I really do, but regulation is slow. I mean, let's be honest, it's inherently reactive. Law enforcement processes cannot provide the instantaneous, cross-platform response needed for a threat that moves at machine speed. And furthermore, many of the most damaging threats originate from foreign state actors who use disinformation strategically to reduce public trust, to destabilize political or financial systems, and they often target linguistic minorities or diasporic communities outside the jurisdiction of national regulators. These threats demand technical solutions that operate across borders and platforms instantaneously. This is why the investment in research is so vital for achieving real-time adaptability.
We're not just building static detectors. We're building systems that use things like incremental updates and federated learning, a concept where models learn from data distributed across various platforms without centralizing it. This allows them to rapidly and dynamically respond to evolving misinformation trends, rather than waiting for legislative bodies to catch up to the technology, which could take years. We need code that learns and adapts in milliseconds, not law that is debated for years.
Wait, but let me push back on that claim of real-time adaptability. If the fundamental architecture of detection is predicated on recognizing past patterns, it will always be a moment behind the generator that creates new, unforeseen patterns. You're arguing for an expensive, complex, and ultimately reactive infrastructure. I'd much rather invest those resources into resilience. The human factor is the only defense that is truly generalizable and adaptable to unforeseen types of manipulation, provided, of course, that literacy is high. We have to accept that we cannot stop all deepfakes. The goal, then, should be to neutralize their impact through high digital literacy, making the public an unwilling audience for the hoax. Now, that is a sustainable investment, unlike a proprietary algorithm that becomes obsolete the moment a new generative model is released.
So to summarize my position, while technical detection systems face undeniable challenges, evasion, false positives, the sheer exponential rate of AI-generated misinformation means that scalable, sophisticated technological tools remain our most essential frontline defense. Hybrid LLMs and multimodal checkers provide the necessary speed to triage the massive volume of synthetic content, while agentic models introduce the vital explainability needed for high-stakes verification. We just cannot rely on human effort alone when hoaxes are produced in minutes and are convincing enough to be trusted by, two-thirds of the population? The code must lead the defense.
And my conclusion is this. Since technical detection can always be outpaced and evaded, and a detection algorithm that fails when an image is merely resized is not a reliable bulwark for society, the ultimate resilience lies in the human capacity for critical thinking, supported by strong regulatory deterrents. We must combine strict legal sanctions that provide a necessary deterrent effect with robust investment in high digital literacy across the entire population, making the human firewall the priority. Promoting rational thinking and enforcing organizational responsibility are the most sustainable countermeasures for a crisis that is defined by perpetual technical innovation.
Ultimately, it seems mitigating this massive threat requires a hybrid approach, balancing the explainability of these structured agentic models with the raw speed of non-agentic systems, while at the same time fostering the critical discernment needed by every citizen.
Right. And the investigation into where that precise balance lies between code and conduct, between platform response and populist defense, well, it has to continue with urgency. We need to be sure we're building a long-term defense, not just another temporary fix.